Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like the whole world was against you? That feeling of helplessness in the face of injustice, as if at the most difficult moment of your life, everything was falling apart? Michael Brooks went through this. His boss cut his salary in half without any explanation, as if his effort and dedication were worthless. But what no one imagined was that this blow, this humiliation, would be the beginning of a journey that would transform him. From employee to entrepreneur, from victim to leader. Today, you will follow a story that will certainly touch your heart. A story of overcoming, faith, starting over, and transformation, which shows us that no matter how difficult life is, there is always a chance to rewrite our story. If you also believe that challenges can make us stronger, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and follow this journey until the end. Michael Brooks has always been a dedicated man with a strong character and hard work. He had a stable job that gave him comfort and, most importantly, the certainty that his life was going as planned. His boss, Stephen Hayes, was demanding, but Michael believed that deep down he respected him. Everything changed when, one Monday morning, Stephen walked into his office and announced a decision that would devastate everything Michael knew. Your salary will be cut in half. This is temporary, but I need you to adjust. Those words fell like a weight on his shoulders. It was an unexpected move, and Michael didn't know how to react. Shock overcame him, but fear was the feeling that stood out the most. How would he pay the bills? What would happen to his family? But the most painful of all was the feeling of betrayal. Michael had given his best to that job, and now he found himself at the mercy of a decision that made him feel as if his efforts had no value whatsoever. That day, the man Michael had seen as a mentor became the tormentor of his stability. But, deep down, something inside him was awakening. He wasn't going to let this define him. Sitting at his desk, he looked at his computer and asked himself, "What can I do to turn this around?" After the initial shock, Michael tried to adjust to the new reality. At first, it seemed impossible. Frustration consumed every thought. He tried to understand what he had done wrong to deserve such punishment. It was hard to accept that someone so dedicated and responsible would be treated so coldly. The reduced salary was more than just a financial change. It was a blow to his self-esteem and confidence. In the following days, Michael could not concentrate. He was trapped in a spiral of doubts and unanswered questions. He had already shown how valuable he was to the company, but his boss seemed indifferent to it. What consumed him the most was Stephen's silence. He distanced himself even more, offering no explanation or comfort. Michael realized that, in his eyes, he was nothing more than a number to be cut when necessary. But amidst this sea of uncertainty, Michael began to question his own worth. "I am not just an employee. I have skills. I have something to offer. This is not the end." Something inside him began to change. Anger at injustice was mixed with an inner awakening, the need to not depend on anyone to be happy or successful. It was time to think about what he could do for himself outside of that corporate prison. The resentment was beginning to turn into motivation. "I don't need this job to be successful. I can create something of my own." Michael felt that this was his chance to change his life forever. He didn't know how he would do it, but he felt he had to try. And, more importantly, he knew he had to act quickly. Michael knew that in order to turn the page on his life, he needed to start something new. But what would that something new be? The idea of starting a new business seemed daunting, especially without the support of a large salary to support his first steps. However, the certainty that his current situation could not continue drove him. With each passing day, the feeling of helplessness turned into a growing desire to act. He spent weeks immersed in research and reflection. Michael knew he needed to find something he believed in, something that would make him wake up each morning with a sense of purpose. Then one day, while watching a video about startup entrepreneurs, he remembered something he had always loved: the art of restoring old furniture. As a child, he would spend hours with his grandfather, refurbishing chairs, tables, and even small objects. It was an activity that made him feel useful and creative. Maybe this is it, he thought. With renewed determination, Michael decided to take up furniture restoration as his new project. He bought some old pieces, researched restoration techniques, and began learning what it took to turn discarded objects into works of art. The process was challenging, and the first results were not perfect, but he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: a burning passion for what he was doing. He was building something with his own hands, something real, something that gave him purpose. As he looked at what he created, a sense of accomplishment filled him. He no longer saw Stephen's work as the key to his happiness. Now, Michael felt in control of his destiny. With each restored piece, he gained more confidence and more certainty that he was on the right path. But he knew that the road was still long, and success would not come overnight. Michael was beginning to feel his skills improving, but he soon realized a much bigger obstacle than he had imagined: the lack of financial resources to expand his business. The pieces he bought and restored were not generating enough profit to cover the costs of materials and tools. His initial capital was quickly running out, and the financial pressure was growing ever greater. The reality was harsh, and he felt the weight of every decision. His dream of being his own boss was on the verge of collapse. Michael began to question whether he had really made the right decision. He could go back to Stephen's job and try to rebuild his stability, but that would mean abandoning everything he had started. His family was worried about the situation, and the doubt of being able to support himself with his new project was increasingly gnawing at his mind. But instead of succumbing to fear, something strange happened. The frustration he felt was turning into renewed strength. He knew that failure was not an option. "I'm not going to give up. Not after everything I've been through to get here," he thought. So Michael began to look for alternatives to face the financial crisis. He sought loans, asked other furniture restorers for advice, and began to form partnerships with local shops. He also offered to do small restoration jobs for friends and acquaintances, hoping to earn some extra money. It was a time of great uncertainty, but also of learning. He realized that in order to move forward, he would need to be creative, persistent, and, most importantly, not be ashamed to ask for help. Michael was increasingly certain that this challenge was the only way to grow. And as he dealt with the pressure, his confidence in his ability to transform himself also grew. He was no longer looking at obstacles in the same way. After months of struggle and attempts, Michael began to feel that his persistence was paying off. He was no longer looking to simply restore furniture, but to create unique pieces with a personal touch that made them special. His work began to be recognized by small local shopkeepers and collectors, and orders began to increase. However, the real turning point came in an unexpected way. At an art and design event in the city, Michael had the chance to exhibit some of his work at a small trade show. The event was not grand, but for him it was an opportunity to showcase what he had done. He was nervous, but he also felt that this was an important moment. When the show opened, Michael was amazed at the number of people who stopped by his table, admiring the pieces and asking more about his work. Then Stephen Hayes showed up. He was there to represent his company at a side event, and, like a good businessman, he was walking around the space to see what his competitors were doing. When he saw Michael's table, his former boss couldn't help but stop and take a closer look. Michael felt a lump in his throat as he watched him approach, but he couldn't let the hurt of the past get the better of him. This was a crucial moment, and he knew he had to show his best, without holding grudges. "Michael Brooks?" Stephen asked with a curious expression, as if he were seeing something new and unfamiliar. "I didn't expect to find you here. Your pieces are incredible." The irony of the moment was not lost on him. Michael, who had been mercilessly cut from his previous job, was now standing before his former boss, showing off his true skill and passion. "Thank you," Michael replied with a small smile. "I found something that really inspires me." As the conversation unfolded, Michael realized that although his boss was no longer in a position to harm him, there was something bigger going on. He didn't know what exactly, but he sensed that meeting Stephen was more than just a coincidence. It was an opportunity that was presenting itself in an unexpected way. After meeting at the fair, Michael didn't know what to expect. Stephen seemed genuinely impressed with his work, but was this an attempt at reconciliation or something more? In the following days, Stephen contacted Michael and made a proposal that surprised him deeply. He wanted Michael to restore a batch of exclusive furniture for one of his partner companies, offering him a generous payment. Michael was in a dilemma. He knew that this job could provide him with the financial stability he so desired, but he also knew that accepting the offer would mean submitting himself once again to Stephen's world, a world that had betrayed him. However, the offer was tempting. The payment could be the boost he needed to boost his restoration business, and it could open important doors for him. He found himself at a crossroads. Would he be able to put aside the resentment over everything that had happened between them? It was not an easy question. Michael knew that the anger he felt toward Stephen could hinder his growth. He needed to focus on his future and what would be best for him, regardless of who was offering the opportunity. After days of reflection, Michael decided to accept Stephen's proposal, but he did so strategically. He was no longer seeking approval or reconciliation. He knew what he was worth and would use this opportunity as a platform to consolidate his own name in the market. When he finally sent his response, he firmly wrote, "I accept the proposal, but on one condition. I want my work to be recognized for what it is, not just as a service, but as an art." Stephen's response was quick, and the negotiation continued. But for Michael, this was not just a matter of business. It was a chance to prove to himself that he was capable of getting back on his feet, not because of someone else's permission, but because of his own merit. With the job for Stephen in hand, Michael threw himself headlong into his task. Each piece of furniture he restored seemed to carry not only his skill, but his story of overcoming. He approached each project with a dedication that exceeded even his expectations. The pieces that had once seemed like forgotten objects were now brought to life in a unique way, reflecting his journey of starting over. Stephen was initially skeptical about the value of the pieces Michael was delivering, but he soon realized that he was dealing with something much bigger than he had imagined. The quality and uniqueness of Michael's work began to speak for itself. Soon, demand for the pieces increased, and Michael was approached by other dealers and entrepreneurs in the area. He felt he was on the right track, but what struck him most was how much his work, something that began as a simple passion for restoration, was now changing his life. Eventually, Michael decided to open his own studio. He knew that by taking this step, he was not only separating himself from his past as Steven's employee, but also creating a solid foundation for the future. He hired people to help him, began producing on a larger scale, and most importantly, began to build a reputation for reliability, quality, and innovation. However, a part of Michael always remembered his old struggle, the time his pay was cut, the humiliation, the fear of the unknown. He used these memories not as anchors for anger, but as fuel for his motivation. Each challenge he faced brought him closer to his true calling. He was no longer the Michael he had been. He was now an entrepreneur, someone who had made his place in the world, not someone waiting for permission from others. It was a quiet morning when Michael received a call that would change everything, again. The phone rang, and when he answered, the voice on the other end made his heart race. "Michael, it's me, Steven. We need to talk." Michael felt a twinge of apprehension. The last time he had heard that name, he had been in a very different place than he was now. But Steven's voice didn't sound the same as it had before. There was something urgent and sincere about it, which made Michael decide to listen to what he had to say. When he met him, Steven looked visibly shaken. He began speaking directly, bluntly. "Michael, I wronged you. I didn't see your true value when I cut you. Now my company is in a difficult situation and I need your help. I'm trying to avoid collapse, and I see that you've done what I've never been able to do. Grow in an honest and sustainable way. I came to you for help. I'm willing to give up my part and acknowledge your work. I want you to help me save what I've built." What happened next was a moment of deep reflection for Michael. He was standing before the man who had brought him down, but also before someone who was, in a way, recognizing his worth. Michael realized that even though the past was painful, he had moved on from it. He didn't need Steven's approval, but he also couldn't deny that the moment called for something more. Michael didn't react with anger or revenge, but with quiet wisdom. He looked at Steven and, with a calm smile, replied, "I am no longer the Michael you knew. What you ask now is something that can be done, but on my terms. If you are willing to work as a team, we can save your company, but everything will be different. My path now is one of collaboration and not submission." Steven accepted, and thus, Michael not only transformed his own life, but also had the chance to change the destiny of a great company. He was now more than a furniture restorer. He was a leader, and what began as a betrayal turned into a great opportunity for mutual growth. Michael Brooks's story reminds us that sometimes it is in the darkest moments that we find our true strength. He was cut off, humiliated, and almost lost everything, but instead of giving in to revenge or despair, he used these experiences as fuel to transform his life. He not only rose again, but found a way to, with wisdom and courage, even change the lives of those who once betrayed him. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever faced a major obstacle that seemed impossible to overcome? And what would you do if you had the chance to turn things around like Michael did? Sometimes, what seems like the end is just the beginning of a new journey. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, and share it with someone who needs a little inspiration to keep fighting. After all, life is full of twists and turns, and you never know when your next one will be. Let's continue together on this journey of transformation and